So erase the board.
Yes, just win. That's
Just
it. That's
play.
it's simple for Toronto.
All right, let's go, Chuck. I'm brought you up.
And let me tell you something. I was up watching you guys at 2 o'clock in the morning last week. Y'all were taking shots at me and Biz, and we didn't like it. But tonight, we get our revenge. The Toronto Maple Leafs win. Let's go, Chuck. Let's go. Miss Mona, John Tavares, and Miss Mona.
I'm about to open this podcast with a quote from Glenn Healy. But first, welcome to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Elliotte, as Glenn Healy was apt to say more often than not after a game like that, sometimes you paint a Picasso and sometimes you paint a barn. It may not have been the most exciting game we've ever seen, Elliotte, until the thrilling conclusion of it. But nonetheless, it was exciting by the end. The Maple Leafs win 2-1 and force a Game 7 against the Boston Bruins. Wide brush thoughts on this one. No Austin Matthews, we should point out, but you listen to this podcast, you already knew that one going in.
Look, Kevin Bieksa said it was not a good game. I completely disagree. It's like art, Jeff. Somebody looks up at a painting, and they, since we're going with the art theme, and they say that thing's hideous. And another person looks at it and says, that is an absolutely beautiful work of art on the level of the Sistine Chapel. I thought it was a great game.
You're angling with the eye of the beholder, not the educated imagination arguments. You're the eye of the beholder.
Educated. Lately, I've seen a lot of things about supposedly educated people that convinces me they're not that smart. So I'm going with the eye of the beholder.
Okay. All right. Very good.
But to me, that was a fantastic game. Now, I realize there were a lot of flub passes. I realize there were a lot of mistakes. But for me, it's all about the drama. And from the moment the puck dropped, the air was thick with it. You could feel it. The fans were nervous. The players were nervous. Everybody was nervous. You could feel the nervous energy, and that made it great for me. Now, I have to tell you, first of all, this podcast dropping on Friday morning, so 6 days ago, the Maple Leafs were being run out of Toronto. Fans were calling Ubers for the players, the coaches, the front office, everybody.
Oh yeah, drive them to the airport.
This car, well, you want to go to Pearson? You want to go to Billy Bishop? Hey, I'll send you to either one of them, but you're leaving. And now they're going to play Game 7 in Boston on Saturday night. The biggest surprise in Games 5 and 6 for me was the tentative way in which the Bruins came out in both games. In the last two games, they have been outshot 23-3. In Game 6, they didn't have an even strength shot. They had one shorthanded shot all period. I don't know what's happened here. You know, I've told this story on the podcast before. The basketball coach, Larry Brown, saying to his players in a game they won by upset, Kansas 1988, don't be afraid to win. He would talk about the fear of winning. Oh my God, we're actually going to accomplish this. I didn't think we'd actually be able to accomplish this. Oh my God, we're going to accomplish this.
That's what it looks like to me. By the way, that happens to people in life all the time, Elliotte. You're 100% right about that.
I'm seeing that with Boston. They get to the precipice, and they lost last year to Florida, and they're here again, and they look tentative. They get stronger as the game goes on. They got stronger in Game 5. They got stronger in Game 6. But they waste the first 30 minutes, and they give the Maple Leafs life. One of the things I think you have to give Toronto credit for is that's one of the best defensive games in a big game that I've seen the Maple Leafs play. They got credit for 5 block shots in the first period. They got shortchanged on that. They were in front of everything. Pasternak, in particular, very early had 2 chances on the same shift, and they blocked both or deflected both. It was an incredibly impressive defensive performance. And look, I think Domi's been great. I think Nyes has been great. I think Wool has been great. But the guy who really stands out is Jake McCabe. I think it's a toss-up The last couple games, I think we all could argue different guys, any of those guys who's been Toronto's best player. But I think it's been McCabe. I really do think McCabe has been their best player. And I think that he's one of the guys, and Nyes is another, and Domi's another, and Bertuzzi, I think he's hilarious. Every time I watch Bertuzzi shifts, there's one or two plays that just make me start laughing. But those guys are the ringleaders, and I admit it. And anyone else who said that Toronto was going to force Game 7 in this series, you're either lying or you're related to them, because nobody thought this last Saturday. And all credit to them. These were big, brass-won victories. Big ones.
One name that you didn't mention there, and you mentioned a lot of good ones. Like, I think that Nyes has been fantastic. And what do they always talk about? Goals go to your feet. And right away, he was moving his feet coming off of that overtime victory in Game 5. And he had a tremendous game on Thursday. Joseph Wall, I mean, that story is getting really well told. He's been fantastic in a really, really tough situation where he didn't face anything until halfway through the game. And then all of a sudden, the Boston Bruins start turning it on. It is so hard to stay mentally sharp for half the game. And then here comes the Boston Bruins onslaught. And it's Marchand, and it's Pasternak, and it's McAvoy. So he was fantastic. The one name, and listen, Max Domi was same as Game 5. Like, Max Domi is like really distinguishing himself above the pack here. The one guy he didn't mention was the guy that scored both the goals. What did you make of William Nylander on Thursday?
Look, William Nylander is paid to do something, and that is score. Okay? The first one bounced in. I don't care. You make your own luck. And, I want to say something about that goal, too. Kevin pointed out on the air. Sheldon Keefe, I think everybody knows the possibility that he's one of many people in the organization who could be in trouble if they had gotten wiped out in this series. He sees that Boston ices the puck, and they've got their fourth line out there, and what does he do? He loads up. He says, okay, big guys, you're going out there, and he gets the goal. Keefe takes a lot of blame, as many coaches do, when they don't get the right matchups. That was a moment where he exploited the matchup and deserves credit for it. Nylander is paid to score. He scored. He did his job. And even if the first one was a bit of a fluke because it bounced in off of McAvoy, they don't ask you how. They ask you how many. Now, I know there's a lot of Bruins fans who are upset about a non-call right before that. Let me just say this. This game was full of non-calls. And, hey, you know me, Jeff. I like a mean, tough game. This was a mean, tough game. That play gets extra attention because there was a goal scored right after it, but there were a lot of plays in this game that could have gotten called but didn't. And so I'm not complaining about any calls that weren't made in this particular game, especially after Wednesday night when I talked about the diving and I had 100 angry messages from all sides at me on Thursday morning.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the Maple Leafs. What about the Boston Bruins end of things? And first of all, another great performance by Jeremy Swayman. That probably is a conversation we should have had earlier in this chat.
He's playing Game 7,
he was excellent.
Right? He's playing Game 7, right?
Look, for me, he shouldn't have missed the game. Bless Allmark in Game 2, but for me, Swayman and just how he hang on. I understand it too, but how he played in Game 1, how he talked about afterwards, and what it meant to him, and all that. Like, you knew this guy was dialed in on the series. So for me, it's the answer to every question about who's starting is Jeremy Swayman. And even after a game like Game 6, for me again, it's I saw Kevin say Allmark, but
Swayman. Kevin is probably drunk on air to make that comment.
Oh, eating space cake.
Look, he got one was a breakaway and one bounced in off his defenseman. He's playing Game 7. We've talked a lot about the consequences of a defeat in Toronto. It's not as if there might not be consequences for Boston too. Like, Boston is a very demanding organization. They expect greatness out of their Bruins. And last year was a big upset, and I think it shocked everybody, and upsets can happen. But I think if we have this 2 years in a row, 3-1 up, lose, 3-1 up, lose. Boston, to me, the organization of the Jacobs family and Cam Neely in particular, I think Don Sweeney is an intense but very level-headed guy. But the Jacobs family and Cam Neely in particular, I don't see them taking this nothing to see here. I just don't believe that. So I think there's a lot riding for the Bruins too. And the other thing I'd say is, one of the things that's clearly happened here, and I was actually talking about this with someone the other day, reminded me about something that I've said, is that it's different in the playoffs when people game plan for you. In the regular season, Boston's a great team. They play smart. They rarely beat themselves. They're talented and intelligent, and that's going to win you a lot of games. They get good goaltending too. But where they think the difference is in the postseason when it's one team for 7 games. If they can game plan for what you do, number one, and number two, if they're, especially in Boston's case, a couple of people said to me, is that if you're disciplined defensively, for all of Boston's hard work and for all of Boston's brains, how many natural goal scorers do they really have? Like you asked me, what about Nylander tonight? As far as I'm concerned, Nylander is a natural goal scorer and he scored. That's what he's paid to do. Like Toronto, even with Matthews out, I think you could argue they still have more natural goal scorers than Boston does. And that, when I text people or ask people, what do you think is happening here? And I was getting these during the game, is that they just said it's Boston, even with Matthews for sure, they have to work harder to score than Toronto. But even without him, they have to work just as hard, if not harder than Toronto. That's a tough way to win in the playoffs. Very tough.
So, Jeff, when after Game 6, we hear Jim Montgomery call out David Pastrnak and say he needs to be better.
Your best players need to be your best players this time of year. I think the effort is tremendous. They need to come through with some big-time plays and big-time moments. I think Marchand has done that in the series. Boston needs to step up.
This is what I believe he's thinking. He's looking at Willie Nylander scoring those 2 goals, and he's saying the guy on our team who can do that is David Pastrnak. Look up and down the Bruins roster. I don't know if there's anyone else there who can do it anywhere near the same level as he can. Just a natural, supremely talented scorer. So what Montgomery is saying, we need you to do that. You have to deliver that for us. Because if you don't, look at what's happening to the Bruins the last couple of games as the Maple Leafs are doubling down defensively. They need that from Pastrnak, and Montgomery and the organization is craving it. They must have it. They know it, and that's why he said it.
The thing is about Boston, though, and maybe I'm being too naive here, but let me throw this out at you. Even if, let's say things go horribly wrong for Boston in Game 7 and they lose, the Maple Leafs advance to face off against the Florida Panthers, it's another up 3-1 and ultimately lose first round for the Boston Bruins. Pasternak's going nowhere. Charlie McAvoy's going nowhere. Mm-hmm. They have a chance to, on July 1st, extend Brad Marchand.
Yep.
I just don't know where any impactful changes would come from other than Linus Ullmark, who still has one more year left of term. I just don't know where, other than we're going to go with some younger kids next year. I just don't know where the impact will come. Matt Grzelcyk's a UFA. I just don't know where the big change would come from.
To me, the Bruins are problem solvers. They will be aggressive and they will go out and they will find something. They couldn't do it as much this year because they did it last year, which they should have. But I look at the Bruins as a team that doesn't sit still, and they're aggressive when they feel they need to be. And I like I said, I look at them as a team that if they lose again, they will not simply stand pat or make minor tweaks. They will say, this is what we need, and they will go out and get it. I always think that way about them.
Okay, last question on this conversation.
Yeah.
This one from the Maple Leafs point of view. They were down 3-1. They were completely written off, as you mentioned earlier. Getting to Game 7, taking this thing to Boston on a Saturday night, is that enough?
Oh, come on. I wouldn't answer this when it was 3-1. I'm not answering when it's 3-3. I want to see it all. I want to have the information.
Corey Perry wants his toe drag back, Elliotte. All right.
I don't like that. I don't have all the information to answer.
Okay, we're going to talk about Vancouver and Nashville here in a couple of seconds.
Say this,
First,
though. They
yes.
have not quit on each other, and they have not quit on
Oh,
their
God,
coach.
no. No, they have not.
Yeah.
Want to get to Vancouver and Nashville here in a couple of seconds, but up first, some coaching talk here. That seems to be the call of the day. What's happening with Rod Brind'Amour? You and I talked about this Thursday on the radio show. You seem to be under the impression, based on who you've spoken with, that something can get done here, and in all probability. Has anything changed since you and I chatted just a little bit after noon Eastern on Thursday?
Jeff, I'm under the impression that this is going to get done. And I have felt that way for a long time. This is what I think happened over the last 24 to 48 hours. I think Rod Brind'Amour, look, Rod Brind'Amour's staying in Carolina. He wants to stay in Carolina. He wants to be in Carolina. That's not news. Everybody knows that. They've been working on something for quite some time. It's basically agreed to. We've reported that. Others have reported that. That's not news. Everybody knows that. He wants his assistants taken care of. He's consistent on that. That's not news. Everybody knows that. The other thing I'll say, too, is that it just wasn't progressing to the level. I don't know if Brind'Amour is frustrated. I'm sure he is a bit. But I think Brind'Amour, never mind, Brind'Amour's a really popular guy in hockey, okay? A lot of people really like Brind'Amour. They like the way he approaches things. They like him as a person. They just like the guy. And they don't like how sometimes Carolina drags their feet with him. So sometimes I wonder, is this Brind'Amour unhappy? Or is it, and I'm sure obviously he's not happy if he feels his assistants aren't being taken care of. But I think also people around him get unhappy because they're like, Carolina knows he's not leaving. Carolina should recognize how important he is, and they do. But they feel that Carolina takes advantage of how loyal he is to the region and the team, and he doesn't want to leave. And I think those people get pissed off. And that's what I think happened here. Someone spoke up and said, it's ridiculous. We haven't gotten this sorted out. And it got out. Like, I don't think those reports were illegitimate. I think they showed the frustration of either Brind'Amour or people around Brind'Amour that this hadn't gotten done yet. And it's not good for Carolina that this comes out on around the playoffs. Like, one of the things I think the Leafs figured out in these playoffs is the weirdness around Nylander. It's just a distraction you don't need. But what they've done with Matthews is, like, they came out right out on Thursday morning and said Matthews not going to play Game 6. And I'm not convinced he's going to play Game 7 while we're talking, but the Maple Leafs just ended those distractions. If you're the Hurricanes, you've had a few days off, and now you know you're going to play the Rangers in Game 1 on Sunday. You don't need this being around your team. You don't need the players wondering, wait a sec, what's going on? Is this our last series with Rod, really? And you don't need other rumors coming out like there was with Mike Sullivan, like, is he going to the Devils? You don't need that with Brind'Amour. So they're going to put the kibosh on this, and it sounds like they're going to get something done. But what I think this really was the frustration pouring out either from Brind'Amour or someone close to him, and saying, I can't believe this is not done. And that's why this exploded at the time it did. I really believe that.
Elsewhere in coaching land, a few things. A little bit later on, we're going to talk about the Los Angeles Kings, and we're going to talk about Jim Hiller. How about we park a few minutes here and talk about the coach that he replaced? Is there anything new with Todd McLellan right now?
Someone told me that he's interviewed with 4 teams.
Oh, so there
Yes.
is. Okay.
Yes. Like, and I
Should be no
look,
surprise.
No, I mean, Travis Green's done some interviews. I'm sure some teams have reached out to Dave Haxtell now that he's free. Craig Berube, obviously, we've talked about him, and we'll talk about him in a second again. I mean, there's a lot of names out there. Dean Evison. It's almost like once you name one, you kind of don't want to forget anybody. But
Keep rolling.
I've heard McLellan has spoken to 4 teams. And my guess on that list is New Jersey, Ottawa, St. Louis, and Seattle. That's my guess. And so, he's obviously making the rounds. Rick Bowness said on Thursday that he's going to meet with the Jets on Friday. They have a team option, but I think we're going to know sooner rather than later. And as we said, really tough year on the Bowness family, and I don't think anybody would hold it against him if he just said it's time. But so Winnipeg, and I think a lot of people are wondering if that's just going to be slid over to Scott Arniel, who did a nice job in the interim there this year. But I clearly McLellan is getting his looks here.
Right. What about Mike Sullivan? That's someone who's had, and we've talked about it before a couple of different times, had some, as we like to say, noise around him here in the playoffs, Elliotte.
Yeah, I still think he's staying in Pittsburgh. Like, basically, from what I understand has happened there, they had, like, someone told me on Thursday that they were surprised by all of this because they were under the impression that Sullivan and Dubas had sat down either late in the year or after the season, and they talked about, are we on the same page here going forward? And the impression in the coaching fraternity was they were. Now, there's been a lot of rumors about assistants, and I think that is potentially a challenge. One of the other things too is Mike Sullivan has had big power in that organization. Obviously, the owners love him. They extended him. Dubas has been given big power in the organization. He's got a 7-year contract. Someone compared it to me. I thought this was a really good comparison. It's kind of like when Dubas became GM in Toronto and Babcock was already there. You had a coach there with the biggest contract in the history of coaching and a new first-time GM. And, Babcock was like, hey, I like doing it my way. And Dubas and him had to find a way to try to work together. And I'm not saying that, I know where everyone's going to go with this. I'm not saying this. Eventually, Dubas fired Babcock. I don't necessarily think that's what's going to happen here. I don't think that's on the radar. But look, Sullivan's had a lot of power in the organization. His contract dictates it. The fact he was given an extension with ownership dictates it. And now you get Dubas coming in. He's got a big contract too. He's got a lot of power. I do think these guys, at times, Sullivan's used to a certain way. Dubas wants it a certain way. I don't know if challenge is the right word, but I do think you've got to figure out how this is going to work. But I had a few different coaches who told me they were under the impression that these two guys had said, we're going to try it because we want to see this through together. We'll see what happens with the assistants. We'll see if that changes, but that's what I'd heard.
So that'd be Todd Reardon, Mike Felucci, these types of people in the organization here.
I don't know. I it's tough on assistant coaches because,
of course it is.
But those rumors have been out there, and I haven't heard anything that would indicate to me that it's wrong at this point in time.
Okay, let's finish up with something you mentioned a couple of moments ago, and that is Craig Berube. We've been wondering ever since the moment he was dismissed by the St. Louis Blues when he would reappear. His name has been attached to various teams throughout the season. Every time there's a coaching vacancy, his is usually the first name to pop up as a potential candidate. He has to land somewhere, right, Freach?
Yeah, and again, I hate mentioning this in the podcast because it sounds a bit stale. I still wonder if he's a guy who someone jumps at and makes an offer. So anyone who's not currently in but might be thinking about it, especially based on playoff results, can't participate. I've had people tell me, you got to keep on that one because it's going to come sooner or later. And, Ottawa and New Jersey are two teams that everyone's talking about, and we'll see if there are others.
Okay, so that's the latest on the coaches and the carousel around the NHL. Vancouver and Nashville. We started off the podcast by talking about a Game 6. Here comes another one, and a real nice touch on Thursday with JT Miller wearing Arthur Shilov's dress shirt in practice, which
I love that.
I, for one, very much appreciate it. I love stuff like that when it comes to hockey.
I thought that was great. I thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, loved it. Loved it.
That was have you ever seen that video of the Blue Jays playing a practical joke on Derek Bell?
Yeah, they sold his car.
Well, no, but they said there's a
they're
fan
giving away his car or something like that.
And they drive his car on the field.
The look
That's
on his face,
the kind of
the best.
when Shilov saw Miller go by him, it kind of reminded me of that look from Derek Bell. It's a great video.
Yeah, it's good.
Hey, a great series, just great hockey, great series. I got to think, the other night I was on with Stauffer in Edmonton and I said, I think it's DeSmith. I don't know. I really don't know, but I think it's DeSmith, but I'm wavering the other direction. I'm thinking, I'm guessing. I'm guessing Shilov's.
Why have you changed your tune?
I just, I think he's played a couple games in a row. He's played well. I don't know. Tocchet seems to really like him. But I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
The insider supposedly is an outsider on this one.
Look, like Rick Tocchet's got out of his way to talk about, closing up when you get a chance here. Right? And finishing teams off when you get a chance. And we've talked so much about killer instinct and you have to have it as a team. I think one of the things we forget here with Vancouver is this is their first time going through it for each. Like we want to treat them like just because they have so many players that are, up for hardware and, best in their position, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is still this team's first time going through it.
I think the other thing too, I think that's a great point, but I think the other thing too is that, Hughes obviously doesn't look 100% and Roenick doesn't either.
Yeah.
The guy has nothing in 5 games. And Nashville has targeted those guys in a playoff way, nothing illegal. They're going hard at those guys and they're making life difficult on them. I picked Vancouver in 7, so I don't necessarily think they're in trouble, but Nashville has made this series as challenging as they could make it for them, which is what you have to do. I think this is going to be a great game. I don't know how much I'm going to be able to see of it, unfortunately. Friday is going to be a very emotional day. A few of us are going out to Newfoundland for Bob's funeral, so I don't know how much I'm going to be able to see it, but it is. I've loved this series. I've enjoyed every second of watching this series. And you know what, Jeff? It's nice to have some drama. When you have 5 series that end in 5 games or less, that's not a true fitting first round. So to see Vancouver give us some drama, Dallas give us some drama, Toronto, Boston give us some drama. We all need drama in our lives. Our lives can't be boring.
I hope you're right. 7 games of this. Yes, I'll take that on my order. Okay, coming up after the break, the Montana's Thought Line. A little bit later on, we will get into that Dallas-Vegas situation as well. Don't go anywhere. 32 Thoughts returns in a moment. Listen to the 32 Thoughts podcast ad-free on Amazon Music, included with Prime. Welcome back to the program, the Montana's Thought Line, Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. Thank you to
This
Rick
will
Turner
never
for that
not
one.
be funny to me. Never not funny.
It always gets a smile, just like the barbershop quartets. That always gets a smile from me, too. Thank you, as always, to Rick Turner. 32 Thoughts at sportsnet.ca, 1-833-311-3232. 32 Thoughts, sportsnet.ca, 1-833-311-3232. Andrew, why do goalies in the NHL no longer wear neck danglers? By dangler, I mean the clear piece of plastic that was strung to the goalie's mask and hung to protect the throat. When I think of goalies past, I think of Patrick Roy and Martin Brodeur both wearing a dangler. Marc-Andre Fleury still wears a dangler. So wait, actually, as I type this in real time, I may be looking in hindsight with Quebec tinted glasses. If I am wrong, and the dangler is/was just a Quebec thing, it wasn't, then what would the reason a goalie wouldn't add a layer of protection with low-angle shots trying to deflect off the goalie's mask seemingly on the rise? That is from Andrew. So, guess who I texted with this question today?
Carey Price.
The goalie whisperer.
Oh, Kevin Woodley. That's even better.
Yeah,
Carey Price doesn't know as much as Kevin Woodley. That's a good
Clearly.
Good call. Good call.
Over any NHL goaltender, I'll take Kevin Woodley.
I can't believe I didn't guess that.
It's okay. But Woodley brings up a couple of interesting points in the text exchange that we had. One, he said, quite frankly, guys just get annoyed using it because it's always bouncing around. The other thing, which is really interesting too, and that is he talked about how neck protection has really improved with modern foams, and guys aren't as worried about it now because if you look at the modern approach to goaltending, like remember Patrick Roy, I used to always look, he had like that big, huge, long neck when he played, right? Because the neck was exposed, the chin was up, looking around, scanning. But the way to play net now is when you track down on pucks, your chin tilts down and the mask itself protects your neck. Essentially what I'm saying is the style of goaltending now doesn't expose your neck as it used to in seasons past. But the one thing that's interesting here that I'm curious about to see what changes, and Elliotte, we just saw this in the Vegas-Dallas series most recently. You and I have spent a lot of time talking about goaltenders in the RVH and players shooting from the side of the net and bouncing it off their heads.
Yeah.
And what that means for their safety, most notably. And you and I always focus on the head. And as part of the exchange that I had with Woodley, he said, I wonder with all the headshots with goalies in the RVH, how many times a goaltender is going to end up taking it in the neck instead of the head. So I don't know if there's going to be more neck protection because of this new phenomenon of players like, most recently Dadonov firing it from a side angle. But he said, I don't think we're going to get back to the everyone wearing neck danglers, but I do wonder, along with Woodley, at what point we start to see some more neck protection just for guys that are shooting pucks at their heads, because I don't think the RVH is going anywhere, Frege.
Sorry, Jeff. I tuned you out while I was texting Patrick Roy your phone number while you were calling him Big Neck Guy.
Don't you? I love those.
So I'm
pictures of
sure
Patrick
the
Roy
answer was good, but I wasn't listening to any of it.
Sorry, Patrick. I always loved watching those big shots of Patrick Roy, almost like an ostrich staring above everybody. Don't forget, he was a really tall goaltender too. All right, let's move on from that before I get in any more trouble here with Patrick Roy. Here's one. David. He describes himself as the only hockey fan in Columbia, Missouri. Good morning. If it was later in the day, I would ask you if you had tried the ribs yet. I'm guessing he's writing this first thing in the morning.
Go Tigers.
I was wondering if certain colors are off limits when a new team comes online or an established on rebrands. For instance, Quebec had a distinctive shade of blue. That's true. When a Seattle or Vegas comes online or a team redesigns their colors, is that Quebec blue or shade similar to it? In which he writes, Pantone PMS 300C, good for you, David. That's respect. Is that off limits? Would the league or the Avalanche, quote, own that color and make sure no other team goes near it to retain its uniqueness just in case? Colors, Elliotte.
I assume you looked this up?
I did not, but I think I know the answer to this one.
Okay. That's a good question. First of all, I loved watching Missouri basketball in the 80s and 90s. Norm Stewart. Shout out Columbia. One thing I do know, Jeff, is that there is some layer of you cannot steal other, like these are trademarked, right? So right there is protection. But the league is very careful that, each team looks unique in its own way. They don't want copies. I mean, I'm sure there are some things that are done as a nod to someone else or a tribute to someone else, but they want to look unique and they want to look different.
Yes. Like, I think that the NHL assumes that there's going to be some type of color overlap. How can there not?
Yes.
But, Elliotte, if Utah came out tomorrow and said, we're going to go to orange and black, well, there's a team in Pennsylvania that may be curious what your plans with orange and black are. All I'm saying is I think the NHL understands that there's going to be overlap in color. But to Elliott's point, I don't think that you'll be able to completely rip off colors and color schemes, to say nothing of patterns or holes. But great question. One that is a very intriguing one for yours truly. All right. Here's one that might get your eyeballs rolling. Drew from New Jersey. Dom, Jeff, Elliotte. First of all, love the podcast. Started listening about a year ago. Haven't missed an episode. Thank you, Drew. As I watched the Bruins-Leafs game, I thought of a potential rule change that might interest Jeff.
Oh my God! I don't even. Do I want to log off right now?
Yeah, I know. I want to get your thoughts on this one. I'm kind of like meh on this one, but I want to hear what you think.
You won't even entertain it. This is either the new Coke of NHL ideas or the new Homer. Remember the car from The Simpsons?
I do. Do you remember what the horn played?
No, what?
La Cucaracha was so good.
This is going to be the Homer of NHL rule ideas. Okay, hit me. I'm bracing
here
myself.
It is.
Okay.
Here it is, Elliotte. This will be the final question. Final question on the thought line for you. Here we go. On a delayed penalty,
okay.
What if the player who commits the penalty has to be the one to touch the puck to end the play and start the power play? With the extra attacker, the pending power play team can make sure they control the puck or at least guard the penalized player from stopping play. So there's the wrinkle. Delayed penalty, it's the player who the penalty is on who has to end the play.
I have to say, I don't hate it. I don't think it'll ever happen because I think there's too much room for injury. The longer it goes, like a skilled team, and like, could you imagine the Oilers with that rule?
Well,
they would have the empty net for 6 minutes before that one guy was able to touch the puck. It's not bad. I have to say, I respect the thinking. The risk of injury, I just don't think they would do it.
And here's why. And this is where I went to on that. Similar to your risk of injury, there will be teams. I mean, every team will try to do this. Obviously, keep the puck away from the player in question. And eventually that player is going to exhaust. And what do you do? Like, that player can't change? Then you have a completely exhausted player on the ice, and exhausted players equal injuries.
Yeah.
You're freezing a player on the ice, and who knows, like that delayed, to say nothing, the poor official has got to keep his or her arm in the air for that long as well. Oh, we talked about
Are you going with this arm in the air thing again?
Well, why not? Well, we're getting goofy here on a Friday morning podcast.
I have to say, not the worst idea. You've had plenty of worse ideas
I don't think
thought
that's going to happen.
See, that's weird because I was kind of like, meh, I'll just throw it out there. It might mildly annoy Elliotte. And
On the
instead, you
Merrick
actually
scale of
like it.
insanity, that's only like
Yeah.
a 4.
It's not mine. This is David and Clement.
No.
This
But
is
on the
David's
Merrick
idea.
scale of insane ideas, it's only a 4.
All right, try harder, everybody. The Montana's thought line. Let's find Elliott's last nerve and pluck it like a fiddle. The Montana's thought line. Montana's Barbecue and Bar, Canada's home for barbecue. Wrap up the pod in moments.
Jeff, Elliotte, and Tom on 32 Thoughts. Try their ribs today. Oh, yeah.
Welcome back to 32 Thoughts, the podcast presented by the GMC Sierra Elevation. Elliotte, we thought this was going to be a marquee series. It is a marquee series. It is a series that keeps on delivering, and Game 5 was no different. 3-2 is the final score, a wild first period with 4 goals, some controversy along the way. A great Jake Ottinger save on Chandler Stevenson with 2:35 left.
Yes.
And the
Yes.
Dallas Stars grab a 3-2 series lead. They've now won 3 games in a row off the defending Stanley Cup champions, the Vegas Golden Knights, Elliotte.
What a series. An incredible series. First of all, credit to Dallas for picking themselves off the mat. Down 2-0, 2 defeats at home, going into one of the toughest places in the league to play, using it as a launch point for 3 straight wins. Mean series, lots of high-quality entertainment, good hockey, what we could have asked for in the Stars and the Knights. The Knights' own actions indicate to me that they think they're in trouble. And the reason I say that is you go back to the year that they beat Colorado. They were down 2-0 to Colorado, and they were coming home. Colorado won the first 2 games at home. That was a confident team. They were like, yeah, we lost these 2 games, but we still think we're going to be okay. And they were. They won 4 straight to win that series. I just remember how confident they were. It's rare for me to see the Golden Knights not look confident. I don't think they were too worried after Game 3, but I think they were worried after Game 4. And the giveaway was some of the changes. They go from Logan Thompson to Aiden Hill. They really rejigged their group. Like, there were a lot of moves there that said to me, whoa, like Vegas is concerned here. And I don't think anybody should be hugely surprised. Dallas is that good. And when they are steamrolling, as they started to, they are very, very difficult to stop. The thing about Aiden Hill for Logan Thompson, I go back to 2017, Ottawa-Pittsburgh, Eastern Conference Final. Matt Murray that year got hurt right before the playoffs in warm-up of Game 1. Marc-Andre Fleury took them in 2 rounds, took them through, got them to the Eastern Final against Ottawa, then got yanked in a game Pittsburgh lost. And I remember we were traveling to Ottawa for one of the games, and I was talking with Kelly Rudy and Craig Simpson. I said, geez, I wonder who's going to start. And they scoffed at me. They said, Mike Sullivan is starting Matt Murray, and it's not even a debate. And I said, why? And they go, because Mike Sullivan won a Stanley Cup with Matt Murray, and he's always going to be loyal to that. When he's in trouble, he's going to Matt Murray. And so when this happened, that's the first thing I thought of. This is not on Logan Thompson. Bruce Cassidy won a Stanley Cup with Aiden Hill, and he's not going down without going to Aiden Hill. And I'll tell you something else, Jeff. Another person reminded me of another of my conspiracy theories.
Oh,
and
yes.
It goes back to the 2006 Stanley Cup Final, Edmonton, Carolina.
Great series.
Game 6, who shows up out of nowhere? Eric Cole, who we thought we were not going to see again that season. He'd suffered a serious neck injury. We thought there's no way he's going to play. He shows up for Game 6 in Edmonton, which the Oilers win to force Game 7. And someone said to me, Eric Cole was not about Game 6. If he did anything, it was a bonus. They said Peter Laviolette dressed Eric Cole because he was more worried about Game 7.
He did not want him coming in cold for Game 7. He said, if we lose and we have to play Game 7, I want Eric Cole with a game underneath him. And so I think he goes to Adin Hill because he won him a cup. But 2, I think it's also, let's get him in there. Let's give him a game. Let's give him some touches. Now they've got less runway. They've still got to win 2 games. But I wonder if he looks at it and says, I'm happy I got Adin Hill a game. One conspiracy theory, the Simpson-Rudy one, I believe 100%. The other one, we'll find out.
Elliotte, something I mentioned on the radio on Thursday. I want to run this by you quickly. I don't know who handles the Dallas Stars social media, but Dallas Stars social media is very active and very creative and excellent. I think back to one of the great hockey tweets of the Twitter age, and that is April 12th, 2012 at 1:26 Eastern AM from the LA Kings. To everyone in Canada outside of BC, you're welcome. I do wonder, considering how this is Vegas versus everybody, and we all understand the dynamics and the issues at play here, what the Dallas Stars social media team has cooked up should the Dallas Stars eliminate the Vegas Golden Knights. Do we see something similar to everyone in Canada outside of BC, you're welcome? We'll see.
I don't even think about this kind of stuff. I really
they
don't.
are. You don't think that they are?
Might, but you know what? Like this series is not over. Like I said, I think the Knights are reeling a bit. I think they are surprised at how this has gotten away from them. Mm-hmm. But to me, this is the same as Winnipeg, Colorado. It's a Stanley Cup final in round 1, and somebody good was going down. And even though it's 3-2 Dallas and they've got the momentum, this is far from over. To me, I don't even think of stuff like that.
You know the Dallas Stars social media team has something cooked up in case they win. We'll see. We'll see. Okay. And so, Elliotte, the question becomes for the Los Angeles Kings, what next? Or maybe who's next? The Kings exit by way of the Edmonton Oilers for the 3rd time in as many seasons in the opening round of the playoffs. And we have questions about the general manager. We have questions about the big trade acquisition in the offseason. We have questions about the goaltending. Where are your questions with LA?
Jeff, there's no doubt in my mind that the biggest question that everybody is asking here is, are there going to be changes, big changes throughout the organization? And one person who is closer to this than I am pointed out one thing, and that is that this is an incredibly patient ownership group. Incredibly patient. Dave Taylor, 9 years as GM. Dean Lombardi, 11 years as GM. Rob Blake just finished his 7th season. Now that's close. It's not 9 and it's not 11, but it's not insignificant. So I think that's one of the questions that we're all waiting for here. Has, 3 years of losing the Oilers in the first round, does that nudge a generally very patient ownership group into saying, now it's time for us to act? One of the things I always wonder about this is, what's the financial health of the franchise? Like AEG is a massive, massive organization, and the Kings do not affect the bottom line. But I'm not naive enough to believe that these companies, they run them like businesses, and they want to make sure. Like, is there something behind the scenes that AEG says, look, we're a little concerned about this. Our season ticket renewals are down, or our attendance isn't that strong, or whatever the case is. Those are the kinds of things that can always influence the decision. To me, with the Kings, one of the things I've always wondered is, and Rob Blake has another year left on his contract, how much longer does Rob Blake want to do this? I think he's a really competitive guy. I think he burns to win. And some of the things that have kind of happened over the last couple of years have reinforced that to me, how competitive he is and how much he burns to win. But I did wonder, how long would he want to do it? And I think that's another thing I often wonder if it comes up in these conversations as well. The other thing I think about too is it's kind of been assumed around the NHL that if the day came that Rob Blake was no longer the GM, Marc Bergevin was already there as his successor. And I wonder if we are in a situation where Blake says, okay, it's time, does that mean that this is still the succession plan? Or would ownership say, no, we've got to go outside? So these are the questions I kind of have when it comes to the front office and the organization here.
Now, Jeff, before we talk about Dubois and the situation that involves him, just remember that any conversation about a Pierre-Luc Dubois buyout involves 4 numbers.
Okay.
2038. As in, he would be on the cap for 14 years, ending in June 2038. A cap hit that at its highest would be just over $3.8 million. There's 3 years it would be close to that, but for most years would be below $2 million, including the last 7 seasons of the buyout, which would be about $1.1 million. But it's 14 years on your cap if we're going down this road.
So then would hockey have its very first Bobby Bonilla day?
It's a good question. You come up with all these things I never think of. I have to tell you that.
Well, listen, and further to that, when you're looking at numbers like 14 years, again, we don't know if they're going to go down this road. But if they do, Elliotte, you have to really be done with someone to say, you know what, the 14 years is worth it. You have to be really done with someone.
Now, Dubois turns 26th on June 24th. And the reason that's important is if you're 26 years old and you get bought out, it's a 2/3 buyout. The player gets 2/3 of his contract, gets all bonuses, but it's 2/3 of the salary of his contract over double the term remaining. But if a player is 25 or under, and Senators fans will remember this happening with Colin White, it's 1/3 of the salary over twice. So that's a significant change. I was under the impression that what mattered was the age at the end of the NHL season. The NHL calendar year goes from July 1st until June 30th. So because Dubois turns 26th on June 24th, I thought that meant he was 26 years old at the end of the calendar year, so it was 2/3 no matter what. Now, somebody who's a lot smarter than me sent me a screen grab from the CBA, and they said to me, look, if you read the CBA, it seems to matter what the actual date is a player gets bought out. So I double-checked it with the league. And I was told that person who sent me the screen grab is correct. If Dubois is bought out before his birthday, which is June 24th, the Kings can buy him out for 1/3. Now, here's the kicker on this, Jeff.
Okay.
By the CBA, the buyout period begins the later of June 15th or 48 hours after the Stanley Cup final ends and concludes on June 30th.
Okay.
The last possible date of the Stanley Cup final is June 24th, which happens to be Dubois' 26th birthday.
Oh, wow.
So there's a lot to unpack here.
Wow. Okay, so this is one to follow very closely.
Yes. Look, I also think this, and I say the same thing about the Kings I do about the Jets, that you always look who you lose to. Yes, they lost in the first round, but they got stampeded by a team that destroyed a very good penalty kill. So what does that mean? How do you look at this? I think they've got to get stronger in goal. while some of their prospects looked like they're going to hit very well, like Byfield looks like a stud. Brant Clark is coming. He looks very good. But they only had, of all the kids they drafted, only 2 of them were in the lineup for Game 5. Now they've made some other good calls. Philip Deneau, I think, was a really good call. Trevor Moore, trading for him, was a really good call. So Rob Blake has his hits and he has his misses. I think the Kaliev situation is really unfortunate. I would have liked to have seen him get a chance against Edmonton, especially in the last couple of games where they needed goal scoring. Like, to me, I would consider that a disappointment. To me, it's all on ownership here. What does ownership think? Because they've been patient with their GMs in the past. And right now, Blake's tenure is not as long as Taylor's or Lombardi's, although it's getting close. That, to me, is the biggest question. And Kings ownership tends to be more difficult to read than other ownership groups in the NHL.
I got to tell you, through everything with the Los Angeles Kings, I have a real soft spot in my heart for Jim Hiller. So he takes over from Todd McLellan, who gets dismissed. It's an interim tag that's on him all season long. And you got to hand it to him, Elliotte. He got them into the playoffs. Question becomes, does it amount to anything?
I think the obvious answers here, Jeff, are that it probably depends on what happens above him. And number 2, I think a lot of people would kind of expect the possibility that the Kings might consider doing what the Devils are doing, seeing what else is out there, although allowing their interim coach, Travis Green, while saying, hey, you're still a contender. You're free to talk to other teams. Now, I will say this. I had one coach who reached out to me on behalf of Jim Hiller, and he said he thinks the Kings would be crazy to get rid of him, because his point was when he took over, they were a reeling, struggling team that was adrift. And I think they went something like 21-12 underneath him, and all the underlying numbers defensively got better. And, he just felt very strongly, and like I said, this was another coach, that if you had plugged any other person behind the bench in LA during this season when he took over, they're not convinced anybody could have done a better job. And one of the numbers he quoted to me was 5 versus 5 goals for percentage, that they were right up there under him, about 57%, which was right up there in Carolina territory. And you know that Carolina territory in that stat is very good. So we'll see where this goes here. And this is not someone who contacts me quite a bit. As a matter of fact, I think it's someone who prefers the reverse of contacting me. But he felt the need to defend Jim Hiller in this particular case.
Okay, let's wrap up the pod there. Don't forget, tonight, a pair of games, a couple of Game 6s. You can see the Vancouver Canucks facing off against the Nashville Predators. That game gets underway at 7 o'clock Eastern. Watch it on CBC and Sportsnet. Then at 10 o'clock Eastern, you can see the Dallas Stars and the Vegas Golden Knights. Much like Vancouver hopes to close out against Nashville, Dallas hopes to do the same to the defending Stanley Cup champions. Watch that one on Sportsnet and Sportsnet 360, as I mentioned, starting at 10 o'clock Eastern. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Back at you again first thing Monday morning.